Want to know what living with Crohn's disease is really like? I'm going to share my story with you right now. My hope is that somebody who watches this can relate to it, whether they've been diagnosed themselves, they've just been diagnosed, been living it for a long period of time, in any sort of way or fashion. I just want to get my story out. I suppose it all begins about 20 years ago. That's when I first got diagnosed. And it began when I was 14. At the time, I'd lost a, let's just say, a family member who was quite close to me. So initially, there was all these kind of theories with the GP that it wasn't processing grief over losing that family member when the symptoms started. If I was to break this down, I'd probably say there's three stages to it. There's the symptoms before the diagnosis itself, and obviously the treatment that follows it. So in that respect, just to start with, the symptoms before the diagnosis, which was probably one of the hardest stages. Oftentimes, Crohn's disease can be mistaken for gastroenteritis, IBS, a variety of digestive related illnesses, stuff that everybody else gets and can, manage themselves and get over quite quickly. So my sort of first indication of there being some sort of symptoms were obviously the usual acid reflux, digesting food and feeling like there was a bit of acid in your stomach, and the usual GP approach is to prescribe lansoprazole for that. That's their magic wand for everything, and it still is till this day, I think. That they've done that. So yeah, of course, took it to my parents at the time that I had these feelings, and they get me into gastroenterology through the GP, go to the GP outpatients. And they just keep explaining it away. Oh yes, he's got digestive distress, he's probably prone to it, he's probably had some issues before, but here's some medicine, blood tests are fine, off you go. And it kind of went through in and out of outpatients for about probably 2 years of my life, I would say, while these symptoms were slowly, progressively getting worse. But I was probably keeping quite silent about it because that's sort of me, a bit of an introvert anyway. So I think over time it just got progressively worse. There was many visits to outpatients, and we just kept going around in circles with nothing really happening other than getting lansoprazole prescribed to help with stomach acid. And then finally there was an endoscopy, which is where obviously they put the camera down the throat and check things out, make sure everything's okay. And even after that, at the time, bearing in mind we are going about 20 years ago, things weren't happening. They weren't really moving in any direction. So I suppose just things over time, wasn't realizing at the time the sort of strain it can have on your mental health at the time. It goes on, it went on for a very, very long time. And little did I realize is that it was slowly eating away at me. Literally, I was beginning to lose weight, sort of distress going to the toilet in a number of ways, which I won't go into. Obviously, I think you can fill in the blanks there. But, by the time it rolled around to getting diagnosed, I was actually severely underweight at the time. 6.5 stone, I believe, and I looked basically like a skeleton. I remember visiting my grandmother's just literally weeks before I was diagnosed with it, and they thought it was a gluten allergy or something like that, but they were putting me on these shakes to try and basically keep my weight up. This wasn't through the doctors or anything, this was actually through my own sort of family's attempts to try and get me well, because they could see how unwell I really was. So yeah, that visit to my grandmother's probably just before diagnosed, and seeing some family I hadn't seen in a while, and they seen how much of a state I was in, was pretty powerful. So obviously when I came back, and then my mum was sort of obviously really worried at this point, and basically said, I'm going to sit in the accident and emergency department with you until they do something, because you are severely ill. And at that point it's kind of like my mother's entertained my worst fears about losing me, and I'm also feeling like I'm trying to scream but no one's hearing me, with that same sort of suffering silence feeling that nobody likes, because the unknown is, the really hardest part of the deal. It's pretty the raw part of the deal, to be honest. So finally, she got on the phone to her pediatrician, who actually had some sense and some knowledge, and suspected it was actually Crohn's. Pulled me into the pediatric ward at the time. I was about 15. I was just about to start my last year in school, which is a big exam year. And basically said, yeah, you're absolutely right about everything. He's in such a state. We'll admit him to the ward. And then they made me drink this sort of chalky thing, and then take loads of x-rays, and finally the diagnosis came. So yeah, that was that stage of it. I know I'm probably paraphrasing a lot of this, but there's a lot to remember from back then. I probably, maybe in future videos, I'll be able to remember things and sort of talk about those in more detail and answer questions in the comments. Feel free to throw them in. I'm an open book on this now. That was basically the beginning of the worst stage of it, which was not knowing what was going on, because it's sort of right in the way that they say that your body's, if it sometimes feels living with Crohn's, that your body's attacking you, and not knowing what is attacking you is probably the worst part of it. So then obviously now comes the diagnosis. This thing, whatever it is that was eating away at me, that was making me lose weight, that was making me throw up actual acid from my tummy on the walks home from school, that was causing me all sorts of distress in the toilet department, finally had a name. So when that got a name, you had something to attack, you had something to fight, you knew what it was, you knew what to do. So then it was all about getting all the treatment sorted, because finally we knew what it was and somebody was taking me seriously. Thankfully today I believe there is many advancements in medicine that have made it at least easier to diagnose, but for me it was very difficult. So probably in the next stage of this story is obviously the actual diagnosis itself. When the treatment started, it wasn't until a week after I got told about the diagnosis that it really hit me emotionally, because finally I realized that there was going to be some good done, there was going to be something happening. First of all, I got put on loads of steroids to fatten me up, basically, to get my weight up. That kind of impacted me at school a little bit, because I suddenly had the cheeks of a hamster. And somebody in school, one of the bullies, suspected that I was on some sort of steroids, but they mistook it for me obviously misusing certain medicines, but in fact it was prescribed for me. So anyway, that wasn't really good, because it flared up acne, and then acne would actually bleed without me touching it, and it was pretty hard. Had loads of multivitamins I had to take to obviously get my health back up to where it was. Plenty of these awfully tasting sort of nutrition drinks designed to obviously, again, increase weight, well-being and things like that. To the point where I was taking about 28 tablets in a day. And that was my introduction into it. And of course, regular blood tests with certain medications that I was taking. I think like azathioprine was one of them. By the way, I'm no medical expert. I'm not recommending treatments. This is just my experience. So don't take this as a way of going to your doctor and saying, oh, can you give me this medicine or that medicine? I think there was a lot of visits to the hospital. In and out of hospital, but these were good visits, but nevertheless I can only imagine what it must have been like for my parents at the time, having to take time out of work to make these constant visits. to try and make this work, to get me better and stuff. They were trying loads of different things before they considered surgery. There was this experimental drip that they put me on to try and stable things out. So sometimes I'd just be going to the ward to sit and have a drip and a cannula in my hand. This is why I no longer care about needles being put on my arm. I used to at one point when they were doing loads of blood tests, but I got over it fast, because there was so many times that so many needles had to be put in. When you're 16, you're allowed to have this, numbing cream, but it used to take about 45 minutes, and then in the end, my old man at the time said, if you can just find a way to bear it for a couple of minutes, you will not be sitting in the ward for an hour, you'll be able to go home. And he was absolutely right. A couple of minutes of discomfort and away you were. So, but yeah, that was it. It hit me emotionally a week afterwards, to the point of tears, because I realised what I'd been going through all those months. So the treatment continued on, and that was my first few months of school, I should say. And when we came to Christmas, luckily I was in some sort of semi-decent state. I wouldn't say I was obviously well by any means, but certainly a lot better than I was because we were getting treatment. But then they said basically, towards the end of the year, I think it was probably just before Christmas, that they basically said, look, this isn't doing the trick. You're going to have to go in and get surgery, which is to remove the worst bit of the colon, and then stitch you back up basically, and so you can have like a bit of relief in your life. So then that was sort of January of the following year. Happy New Year to me, and then I'm still trying to get my studies done at school, and I'm not really studying at all. So then came the surgery, to which I was transferred to another hospital. And I remember going into the place, and it was a royal hospital, and it certainly felt like I was in the 1940s because it was so prehistoric. The architecture of the building was lovely, but the level of treatment, wow. There certainly needed some improvements there. So I guess that probably leads on to another segment of the story, which is the surgery, I suppose. I'm surprised how fast I'm getting through this, really, but there's probably a lot more to tell than what I'm telling you. I'm just trying to give you the headlines, I suppose. And then I remember before the surgery was about to happen, they came in, and obviously they have to prepare you for the possibility that you will need a stoma bag for about 6 months after the procedure, in case something goes awry during the surgery. So they come in and they start with this marker pen on my tummy, start marking little X's as if I'm like something out of that little board game Operation. Felt like I was that guy on the table, just drawing little X's on my tummy as if I'm sort of a machine, really. But so in that respect, that was a bit scary. Going in for the surgery itself was relatively easy, getting put to sleep. I've been put to sleep before for endoscopies and colonoscopies, just before obviously the diagnosis, so that was pretty easy. Obviously the recovery was the hard part. Remember waking up, and obviously my mother was there. Obviously when I woke up, they took me back to the ward. I had no muscles in my stomach working, basically, because they sort of cut around my belly button a bit to open me up to do what they needed to do. So when they laid me down back on the bed, they said, look, you're going to have to trust us to lie you down rather than try and use your muscles to sort of carry yourself down as if you're lying backwards. You're always using your muscles or when you try to get up when you've been lying down, you'll use your stomach muscles to pull you up a little. Because that was painful. Plenty of morphine that particular week. I also remember that there was a tube up my nose and into my tummy, and then they would basically get a syringe and then they would pull out all the stomach acid and check the contents of it, and then push it all back in. That was the worst part of it. I hated it. I was really uncomfortable, to the point the doctor said, "Okay, he's clearly not happy. Let's just take it out. Let's get rid of it." Thank God, because I'd had enough by then. Had to get a catheter in for probably the first 24 hours because nothing was working down there because they've just been poking around with it. But boy, probably about the second or third day when the bowels started activating again, oh boy, that was really, really tense because I had no bowel control whatsoever. So there was literally, don't want to get too graphic here, but leakage out of a certain end, and the toilets were all the way at the other end of the ward. Which it was a big ward, and I had to walk from one end right away to the other. And I had to do that 7 or 8 times a night, so I didn't sleep that particular week at all during the recovery. To this day, I don't eat jelly babies because they said the only thing you can eat really whilst you're in recovery is jelly or jelly babies. So when the family found out, they bought me boxes of jelly babies, and I haven't been able to see them since. It's always a bit of a running joke, that one. So yeah, it was particularly hard, but I knew I was going through it for a reason, and finally something had been done about it. So my friends and family always tell me there was a lot of courage shown by me around that time, not just because of the things I was going through, but because once it had a name, like, I was ready to fight back, mentally. The point is, I hadn't been able to fight back before the diagnosis because there was no name to it. We didn't know what I was fighting back against, or how to fight it. Now we were fighting it. We were in the middle of it. But yeah, when I got out of that hospital, when the bowels started to calm down on the last day I was in the hospital, I was so grateful. So grateful. I actually went through this was at a time when DVDs were just coming out, and DVDs were on the rage generally. And I just brought loads of DVDs in. Someone brought me a DVD player in, and then there was loads of DVDs. I think I watched loads of episodes of something called The West Wing, if you're a fan. I watched the entire season 1 in that week. Yeah, it was fantastic to obviously have got that surgery, which has given me a long time of pleasantness ever since, with obviously a few flare-ups here and there. I remember going back to school probably about 6 weeks later, and people had been told what I was doing, like why I was gone so long, and apparently there was a big assembly when I was gone, to say, oh, by the way, X class is very, very sick and he's going through this surgery as we speak. And yeah, when I got back to school, everybody knew everything, and they were actually quite nice to me for a time. Even the school bullies, because I was a part of the popular crowd. But yeah, one of the pivotal moments after the surgery and I got back to school and got back into things, was, some of the teachers really rallied around me. Some of them already liked me anyway, but some of them rallied around me big time to say, like, whatever you need, we're here for you, and we'll look after you. And just really brought me out my shell, I think, that particular year. They had to write a letter to the exam board when I took my actual exams to say, by the way, this guy has been through so much, he's lost 4 months of school. When you read his work on his exams, give him a break. And luckily they did. I came away with 3 B's and 5 C's. If anyone remembers the ABC system, I know it's different now, but yeah, there was an English language exam that asked you to describe a really hard event in your life as part of the questions and how you overcame that challenge. Oh boy, I owned that question, and that's what I got to be in. When I saw that question, I went to town. I told them, I wrote everything about the, the whole experience of living with the Crohn's. So yeah, I'm not surprised I got a higher grade on that one, because they would have read it and went, okay, yeah, this guy's been through it. He knows what he's talking about. So yeah, that's basically my story. If anyone relates to it in any sort of way, I hope it helps. I hope it sort of gives something to somebody. Anyone who's just been diagnosed, I know that obviously my story's quite brutal at points, but here I am, and I've been living it for 20 years. Probably the last 20 years I've had a handful of flare-ups. I think what's triggered me to make this video though is it's starting to flare up again, to the point where I'm having to go back in for scans and things as an adult. So obviously I'm having flashbacks of what I went through, but yeah, I mean, got a support network around me. I hope that you do have the same. Obviously, if there's any worries or concerns, leave them in the comments. I can probably relate to it through my own experience and hopefully give some guidance, just based on what I've lived through. But yeah, this is a video that I've been wanting to make for weeks, and here it is. So I'm hoping to make future videos sort of about this and other things in terms of health and just everyday life stuff. So hopefully you've found this valuable, and yeah, I suppose that's where I'll leave it. And if you want to check out my other videos, feel free, and just if you're not really sure what to say in the comments, just leave a little emoji or something. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video.